So Irma asked me first to introduce myself, and I will tell you that my author's name is Alayne K. Christian, and the most important thing is I'm Irma's sister. I'm an award-winning children's book author and creator and teacher of a picture book writing course, Art of Arc. I'm the former acquisition editor and art director for Blue Well Press. I'm a professional picture book manuscript critique writer, and in addition, I share my knowledge with writers through free and affordable webinars. I was born in the Rockies, raised in Chicago, and now I am a true blue Texan. God bless Texas. My writing shares my creative spirit and kinship to nature and humanity that reside within my heart. To learn more about me, you can visit AlayneKChristianAuthor.com. So now, what's more important is why am I here today? I'm here today because I listened to all of Irma's podcasts as well as the ones with her guests. And one day I was like, what if someone interviewed the interviewer? So I asked Irma what she thought about that idea, and she liked it. So today's guest is Irma Francis. I'm going to try to tell you a little bit about Irma, and Irma, correct me if I'm wrong. I took a lot of this off of your blog. Irma's been a life coach and spiritual mentor for the last 20 years. She treasures the belief that we all have an innate wisdom, and this is our ultimate guide. Her calling is to support each person she works with toward their own empowerment and understanding that they are a wholesome and worthy person just as they are. After many, many years of study and experience, Irma wears many hats. In addition to her life coaching and spiritual mentoring, she is a wisdom circle leader, theta healing facilitator, inner engineering graduate, high mysticism graduate, mind-body fitness specialist, 5 Tibetan rites instructor, mindfulness, relaxation, meditation, and beyond instructor, I'll get it, and a professional interviewer, of course. Irma believes that, I like this off of your blog, so I had to do it. Like Michelangelo chipping away the stone until the beauty of David was revealed, we must let go of all that is no longer needed for our highest good. Irma supports others in discovering the beauty that they have within. One of Irma's joys is to celebrate the good in life and in people. She believes that within all of us, there's a place of love and wholeness. Her purpose is to stoke that love and wholeness within herself and others, bringing those energies higher and higher as we move closer and closer to one day living in a world of love, peace, and harmony. Irma's intent and purpose is to support and encourage others to live the highest version of themselves. And to learn more about Irma, you can visit Irma at irmafrancis.com. Now remember, Irma is spelled with an I, so it would be IRMA. So Irma, I want to thank you for letting me be one of the first people to get to show the world the Irma that I know and love. We have so many great conversations. We always talk we should record our own conversations.
Exactly.
Anyway, so I was initially going to talk to you about the book that you're working on at the end of this interview, but it kept telling me that it should be at the beginning. Finally, I understood why. Because it's the beginning. But I decided, as with all things, what if we start with the beginning? Many people who are on a spiritual path knowingly step onto their path after life experiences lead them there. But that's not how it happened with you. So, your book, Front Porch View, a memoir of young girl's spiritual awakening, is obviously the beginning of your, starts with the beginning of your story. So I think the title and the cover image, and I don't know, can I share the cover image or, because I do have it.
Do you have it?
Yeah, how do I, wait, no, I want to wait until after you tell your story and then I'll do it.
Okay.
Anyway, I think the title and the cover image are so perfect. So finally, I'm around to my question. Will you share your story about how the title came to you? And then I would love it if you would tell us about your experience as a young girl. Your turn.
Okay, all right. Well, the title, maybe I should tell the experience first because then it will make the title make sense.
That works for
Make
me.
more sense.
Okay. Yeah.
So, this everything I'm sharing and will share in this interview, it's strictly my experience. So the main thing I'm an expert on is my own self and my life experiences, and from that led me into the work that I do. And I don't claim to be an expert of anybody else. I do believe that each person is an expert of their own self. And just like you said about Michelangelo, it's bringing that self-actualized true self forward so that a person can live up to their fullest potential, whatever that is and whatever that means to them.
Okay.
So, my experience in childhood up until the age of 8, I don't recall a lot of memories other than, specific maybe interactions with family members, going to kindergarten, just certain memories, but mostly until this experience I had at 8 years old, I don't remember a self identity, and that's probably typical and normal for most kids.
Mm-hmm.
The strong, we're developing our personalities, and so I don't remember a whole lot until this particular experience at 8 years old, where I know I was in the house, in the family home, and I'm just going to relay exactly how it happened for me. I was told, I heard, felt, listened to a guidance that told me to go outside and sit on the front porch. And I remember clearly hearing it, feeling it, knowing it, and trusting it. And so I did. I went outside and I sat on the front porch. And I was very, very aware of all of my senses. And I just felt, heard, saw. It was kind of like, and I was looking up into the sky, and it was kind of like, it felt like the sky opened up, and whatever this guidance was that told me to go and sit on the front porch kind of opened up the sky in a way and was speaking through that. And that is how I remember it. That's what I experienced. And then from that, there seemed to be this intense, powerful energy that came from that opening in the sky where the guidance was coming from. And it kind of entered through the top of my head and all the way through my toes, and kind of went through me and became like this circular energy. And everything around me also became that energy. So everything was like pulsating with this intense, powerful, loving, peaceful energy.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like it seems weird because I was only 8, but it happened.
Yeah.
From this opening and energy, I started getting like these downloads of awarenesses and understandings about life, about being a human on this earth. And how I interpreted that, I don't know. I know it happened. And so that continued. I don't know how long. And towards the ending of this experience, this guidance told me that I needed to make a choice. And that choice was to stay connected to my true self, soul, or to, if I didn't choose that, and it was up to me, whatever choice I made was up to me. If I didn't choose that, I would slowly forget my true self, my soul, and live my life based on conditioning. Who I was told I was, what I was told I was, what I was told everything on earth was, and how to function on earth. And or I could choose to remember. And I remember very, very consciously choosing to remember my true self, my soul.
Mm-hmm.
And so I chose that. It's almost like I made a commitment to that. And as I did, made my choice, this opening in the sky kind of closed and the energy kind of lessened. And I just want to add, if there's an opportunity to share more experiences I've had throughout my life, each one of them kind of have the same flavor, in the sense that this energy comes, this guidance comes, time stands still, everything around me kind of becomes silent. And it seems like, as that's going on, that I can't really physically get up and go.
Okay.
I guess now I might interpret it as my will is not in charge during those times.
Yeah.
So as I made my choice, the sky closed, the energy lessened, and then that was the end of that particular experience. So going back to the book that came to me, this was many, many years later, well into adulthood.
Right.
I can't remember how old I was. I'm guessing late 40s, early 50s when the title came. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I was sitting in my home, and I think I might have been doing a blog called Spiritual Clarity at the time, and I'm not sure. And that was all done through these downloads that come through me. It's not like Irma decides to write about this. Irma gets a download and writes about what the download instructs. So this particular day, I wasn't even thinking about my blog or writing anything. I was just sitting there kind of peacefully. And a title, I was kind of told that what was coming through was I needed to write a book. And the title of that book should be called Front Porch View. And after that, I was told to go to the back bedroom closet, go into a shoebox and go to the bottom of the shoebox. And when I did, I found a picture of me sitting on the front porch.
Mm-hmm.
And I was 8 years old.
So there's a couple questions I wanted to ask. The first one, and I am going to, in about 2 seconds, give you an opportunity to tell all kinds of stories, because because I have a weird way of doing it. But the first question I wanted to ask was, so that experience was 8 years old. To me, at that point, you're the most purest, innocent thing in your life in relationship to everything that's going to come, at least in my mind. So have you had the same like experience again that you had at 8 years old, or was that one different than all the other downloads that you get? Does that make sense?
Yeah. They all are have a very similar flavor. Like I said,
Yeah.
I feel like a shift. I feel a deep silence, kind of like everything around me stops, or I shift into a different awareness or something. And that I'm kind of, as the experience is going on, it seems like my will takes a back seat or goes away and the guidance takes over.
Yeah, so it doesn't really matter the 8-year-old Irma and however many year old Irma now. I won't.
Okay, I don't mind saying my age. How old am I? 67? Am I?
Yeah. It doesn't really matter the age because that's all the same. You're all the same person.
Yeah, age doesn't really that place. Age doesn't really come into play.
Exactly.
And actually, I believe for all of us, our true self, our soul, is ageless, genderless. It's
yeah. So I'm not trying to put words in your mouth here. It's just my interpretation. So after that experience, I want to use the old cliche to describe what I think life might have been like for you, just observing you as your sister all these years, that you were kind of like a square peg trying to fit into a round hole. And that's not a question, but if you disagree, I want you to tell me, because then I'm going to ask you something else.
Yeah, for sure. That's
kind of what it was like.
Oh yeah, because I didn't after that experience at 8, I was in love with life. Everything that I experienced was just full of energy and love and light and bliss, and it just was like, wow. And so I made an innocent assumption that everybody felt that way, and life was going to be filled with kind of like playmates, and we were just going to have this blissful, loving, playful experience.
And peaceful. One thing I remember that when you talk about you were in love with everything, that I remember as your sister was your connection and is your connection to animals.
Yeah,
animals. You were young, it was like I would watch you and I'd be like, wow, there's something going on. It was like you'd sit and look like at our dog. We have a picture somewhere where you're on one of those like a teeter-totter swing type thing, and the dog's on one side and you're on the other side, and you're looking at that dog, and I know darn well you're communicating with that dog.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
It's not coming out of your mouth, but you and that dog, you're looking at each other's eyes,
Yes. And animals, I had that connection, and also nature. And eventually what I found out is that kind of open, clear connection that I had with animals and nature did not exist in a lot of adults. But there seemed to be something in the way of making that pure connection. And just flashing back real quickly, before the 8-year-old experience, I remember at 7, this was one of those things that I did remember. We had this big oak tree in front of the house. and the neighbors didn't like that the leaves got on their lawn and they chopped the tree down. Before they chopped the tree down, I know consistently that I would go to the front porch and communicate with that tree.
Yeah.
That was my friend.
Mm-hmm.
We were friends, we were connected. And I came home one day and my friend had been killed, chopped off.
Wow.
And I remember grieving it, just grieving.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I went to mom and daddy and said why.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember, but
Yeah, how you found out why it was gone.
yeah, and to let somebody know that was my friend, and how could they possibly let somebody kill my friend?
But there's one of those instances where your view of the world and other people's were different, because I guarantee you they had no idea what you were talking about.
No, I'm sure.
You know what I mean? And it probably got brushed off, which didn't do you any good, you know. But this one, go ahead.
Well, going back to, after that experience and what I was feeling and finding out that, other people weren't feeling that way, I can't remember how long or exactly when I told anybody about my experiences. Do you remember if and when I told you?
We were definitely adults, I think.
I'm sure.
Yeah, we weren't teenagers or anything like that. And I mean, we used to, the kind of time we spent together, there would have been opportune times, but it just wasn't the right time for you. And maybe with, you know what I mean? Maybe if you didn't either sense I was open to it or you weren't ready, because I'm guessing that because of your experiences, you started wondering, well, who can I trust? Because they all seem so different than me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think maybe until I was kind of moving a little bit more towards spirituality and we were starting to kind of gel in that direction, maybe that was when you started. And we were also, I think at that time, doing some writing. I was doing poetry, you were doing poetry, and we were connecting on a different level, I think. And I think that started trusting me with those kind of things.
Yeah, and I think it took a long time for me to figure out what the heck was going on.
Yeah,
a long time. Just flashing.
Wait, I mean, I think you're still sometimes doing it, but at that time, at the time you started revealing things to me, yeah, that's what you were doing. You were figuring out, what was going on. My observation is that you had a strong turning point when you spent time contemplating merging and integrating. That seemed to really, because you until you could figure out how to live in this world that was making you a square peg in a round hole, you weren't going to be able to get to where you are now. I don't think.
Yes. And actually that didn't happen until I was in my 50s, where I think up until that point, I still thought that access point and that connection to higher self and then beyond to the source of all that is, that all people could access that. And it wasn't until my early 50s where I realized, no. And that's it. And not in a judgment place or inferior, superior place, not from that at all, just the realization of like, not everybody even wants to make this choice.
That's what I was going to say. In reading your materials, I don't know, and I don't mean to be putting words in your mouth, that's the only way I know how to say it, is I don't know that you were thinking that not all people can access it. And the reason I say that is from your writings and from talking with you, I think you believe everyone can access it. So I think it was more that not all people were accessing it. So they were on a different plane because they weren't,
Exactly.
and maybe had still not accessed it at any time in their life. So they haven't, they're coming from a different place. Is that
Right.
correct? I
Yeah,
think you
yeah.
believe that all people can access it.
That what?
You believe that all people can access it if they're in a place where they're open to doing so?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
there's no doubt. There's something I wanted to say in connection to that though. Oh, there's no way around having to be self-responsible and do our own inner work. No matter if you have that connection or you don't, there's no
Yeah.
way around it. And here's how I would explain that. That experience at 8 years old, um, I didn't know this then, after reading and researching and things like that, I started connecting a lot of dots. And I think that experience at 8 years old opened my energy up and my connection into this life from the crown chakra down. Except until that integration and that acceptance and awareness that happened in my early 50s, I was kind of living from the upper chakras. And so anytime I would run into people that were in heavy duty fear and survival, there was this clash and I couldn't understand why that was happening. Eventually I figured out the importance for me of activating the lower chakras to be able to integrate and function in a more balanced way in this earth plane. and that seems kind of backwards of how most people, if you want to call it, transcend or connect to their true self, their higher self, their soul. Most people go through the experience of the root chakra on up to the crown and then connecting that way. For me, I think it was opposite, but I still had to work. I still had to be self-responsible and create balance and integration of what I would call, the human self and the divine self, and integration of those two to create a healthy, balanced wholeness.
Yeah. So at the time when you, in your 50s, when you were starting to contemplate the what they call it, merging and integration, right? Yeah. Was that also when you found the psycho-spiritual understanding? Did the psycho-spiritual understanding fit in with the merging and the integrating? And I guess for the listening and viewing audience, can you explain psycho-spiritual a little bit?
We're born spirit, soul. We come from soul, spirit, and we're born into a psychological existence.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of, early on in childhood, we're kind of programmed how to fit in to the psychological existence. And that's why most people forget their connection. Which, we have to, in order to function, we have to learn. And in fact, and I didn't know this until later into adulthood, reading and researching, that up until 7 years old, the brain is actually in certain brain waves that makes that download and conditioning easier. It's kind of
possible. Yeah.
Yeah. And at 7 is called the age of reasoning. That's when you kind of, if that conditioning hasn't been done in those 7 years, but for most people it is done. But what's interesting is looking back, I know very clearly that that experience at 8 years old was that defining moment. Was I going to cross over into conditioning and reasoning and the psychological existence experience, or and that's right when that experience happened.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, it's kind of like your spirit or your soul was noticing, oh,
Yes.
I'm losing her, basically.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because you were starting to be aware of some of these things that, we get conditioned with, and your soul or spirit, whatever you would call it, stepped in and said, well, I'm going to give you a choice here.
Yes,
Again,
yeah.
for whatever reason, we don't know, but, it happened.
Yeah, and after, I just wanted to add, after that experience, I think around 10 years old, I did become aware that I needed that the people around me in the external world weren't, and maybe were not going to validate my inner experiences and that connection. And so at 10, I decided to start writing poetry. And my purpose and intent behind writing poetry was to validate my own experiences. So I wrote about, oneness with everything, and I wrote about nature and animals and that connection and things like that. That was my way of making sure I didn't forget.
Yeah. I don't know how old you were when you wrote it, but one of my favorites is the one about the birds singing for no one but for everyone, or something like that.
Yeah, I think it was.
I can relate to that. I love birds so much. But.
Yeah, I think it was a rose blooms, a butterfly breaks from its cocoon, the sun shines, birds sing, and I just, was kind of writing about how I was experiencing life.
Yeah.
And at the end, I wrote for no one, for everyone, because it wasn't important. The birds didn't need to be acknowledged and validated to be a bird and to sing their song. The sun didn't have to be acknowledged to shine its light. And it was the same for me, and it's the same for everybody.
Yeah. And that's it. I mean, the bird's voice and the sun's warmth and brightness and all of that have positive impacts on people. But like you
just
say,
because.
Yeah, it's not a forced thing. Oh, am I forcing anything?
Yeah.
And so that's what you were picking up was how to just be natural and be with the flow, because you could relate to that. Because the world was telling you should force things, but your spirit was telling you no. So, not to stay stuck on the psycho spiritual. I think some of the things I made a note here, some of the things that I jotted down and stuff, probably because some things jump out at me more than other things on your blog or when I listen to the podcast. Well, I'm assuming that's because of whatever I'm working on, you know what I mean? But with the psycho spiritual thing, I just wanted to ask a little bit from your opinion. Remember, there used to be a saying something to the effect of, I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. Is that it? And I like that, and I always did like that. But when I think more in terms of the psycho-spiritual, that almost, to me, explains a little bit more, because the other is almost like you're brushing off your human experience in a way.
Well, yeah. So maybe saying it, and I think it's more relatable, is I am a spiritual being having psychological experiences.
Yeah. Because to
Mhm.
me, that's more homed in, and something that's where then you start feeling like, well, then maybe these two things should be integrated and merged, because this
Exactly.
is the life I have to live. I'm
Exactly.
here on earth.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, and I don't know this, for sure, but it sure seems to me, based on my personal experience, that possibly a lot of people that are struggling with their emotions and their mental health, their psychological understandings of trying to function in this world, could it possibly be that disconnect? That they themselves are trying to force and fit, and because they aren't, they're experiencing dis-ease mentally, emotionally, psychologically. Could that be?
Yeah.
I kind of think yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, how awful is it, and how difficult to feel that uh, cognitive dissonance, to feel like I feel this inside of myself, but when I talk or interact, I'm getting something different back. And in order to have acceptance, I have to compromise myself. I have to, you know, adjust myself to be acceptable.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying anybody should go out and do whatever they want to do, however they want to do it. Of
Right.
course, we have, rules and laws that we have to function
Yeah.
within.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? How,
I do know what you mean.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's a lot, like some of the stuff I've been experiencing. Which brings me back to what you were saying about, how you believe for you, and I know that there's other people like you out there. So I'm not
Oh, yes.
singling you out, but we're talking about you today with the coming from the top chakra versus the root chakra. Um, and you said that you still had to work. And then you were talking about the disease, not dis-ease, dis-ease in people. Um, that kind of brings me to something that when I was, and I'm still, you know, doing my spiritual practice, I'm lousy at it, but I keep at it. But when I first stepped into that, I guess you would call arena, and with other people that I knew, and you've talked about this in the past too, the temptation for me, but I didn't do it, but I do know that a lot of people do, is to step into the spiritual search, or whatever you want to call it, practice and so forth,
Seeking.
with the idea that that's all I have to do. So you would call it spiritual bypassing. And
Mhm.
I know people who it's like, oh, yes, I'm a spirit, blah, 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 and totally ignoring the human experience. But
Mhm.
it's not, to me, that's not real. Because in order to do that merging and that integration, you do have to work, and you do have to feel some pain, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's no way around that. Yeah, either way, either polarity or extremes, to be totally absorbed into the psychological existence, or to seek and tap into um, the spiritual seeking, um, and maybe even have some experiences and think, oh, I've arrived.
Hmm.
I can just bypass the fact that I've been conditioned and affected by my psychological existence. Either polarity or either extreme isn't going to work, and so hence the middle way. I
Hmm.
mean, to me, that is balance, is finding that middle way, the acceptance of both the psychological existence and your connection to your soul or your true self. It's the acceptance of both and being able to hold that place in the middle, the middle road, you know, Buddha. That's it.
Yeah. And
It's
that's,
not denying anything or bypassing anything. It's the acceptance of all of it.
yeah. I find it interesting because one might look at your experience and go, "Oh, she had the easy way out because it was downloaded to her when she was a kid. She just had to reconnect with it once she figured all this stuff out." And but I don't think that's true. I think the path was just as hard, if not harder, for you than anybody else who wants to. Although I do think that you probably, in comparison to me, and I'm not saying what you've been through is easier than me, because probably your life has been much more difficult than mine in some ways. But what I'm saying is,
I don't think we can compare pain.
yeah, exactly. But I think the cool thing for you is that because you had that download at 8, you've always known what it is. And even though I think from your beliefs, I've always known what it is too. It's just that I don't know that I've known what it is. Does that make sense? And I think that that's why I enjoy, or I wanted to do this, because I'm hoping that somehow your experience can help other people to have a little bit more understanding of what it is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does, because it's no matter what experience a human being is having, there's going to be challenges. There's going to be confusion. Yeah. And I think if you can find that, say that the psychological existence is like a ball of yarn and it's all, wrapped up and tangled together, to me, spiritual clarity and making that connection is finding and always being connected and knowing that you have the choice to find the end of that yarn, the end of that thread. And it's up to you to untangle it and unwind it, to get to the core of it, so that through whatever work you decide to do, inner work, whatever, spiritual practices, however you get to that, and whatever you need to do to start untangling that ball of yarn, that eventually you get to a place where it's all untangled. And I think the odd experience is you might find out that what you thought was going to be there isn't there at all. And to me, I don't like the word enlightenment, but to me, that is enlightenment or liberation. That you aren't seeking anymore, or you aren't trying to fix anything or understand anything, that you've done whatever work you've done to get to a place to untangle all of that and get to the last unwinding. And it's like, who I thought I was and what I thought I was isn't there at all. And the realization that is liberation, and that kind of connects you to everything. You're free. You're free. I don't know if it made any sense.
No, it does, but in a way, and it's such a serious thing. I hate to put it this way, but it's almost like, well, the joke's on me.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly, because I think it is. I think it is. We try so hard to be some kind of form of perfect. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, but in a way, we all are, in the sense
Yeah.
that nature is perfect, but it's always
Mhm.
changing, and it has all these different stages and seasons, and we're the same.
Yeah. Well, I think, and I don't know, the closest that I probably ever come to what you were just describing is when I do the Akashic records, because I do get in another
Mm.
place. But now I lost my train of thought. Oh, I think one of the things of what you're describing is until you get to the punchline of
The joke's on
whatever,
us. Yeah.
um, it's um, in spiritual practice. Speaking for myself, there's so much um, so many attempts to control. So as you're unraveling the yarn that you're talking about, it's, am I unraveling that yarn in a way that I'm letting the yarn unravel, or am I unraveling the yarn and trying to push it back in and put the ball over here, and you know what I mean? Controlling it, thinking that I'm going to find it. I don't know if I'm making sense, but
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
that letting go of that control that is actually the key to being able to gently unwind it and get to that place of, oh, because until you let go of control, you don't know what it's like to be without control, or the illusion of control.
The illusion of control, and that really hits a really, really very strong key point, because that is it. Because yeah, I mean, how we're kind of taught, at least in the Western world, to conquer and attain and more is better kind of living. In that illusion of control and getting to a place where you release that, there's this understanding, realization, and experience that all of life is yours. It's a given.
Mm.
It's a given. And so thinking that, I'm going to find that missing piece in me that's going to make it all okay. I think the realization and the understanding that there's nothing missing and there never was.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you can let go of that illusion of control and just surrender into what is.
Mm-hmm.
That is the now, what is now. And in that nowness, everything is yours. And so, that may be what the Buddhists talk about, non-attachment, because when you try and hold something, that is that illusion of control, and you can only hold so much within your own grasp, but when you release, you have everything. And you know that you're connected to everything, and there's a richness and a fullness in everything. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
Yeah.
I know it from experience.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's like when you were talking about, your experience at 8. It's like, well, all you can do today is try to describe the experience using your adult voice, because it was an experience. And if anybody would ask that 8-year-old kid to try to explain it, my goodness.
I couldn't, and what I would say now, going back to childhood, I would say I couldn't explain it or talk about it because I was it.
Yeah. And how do you explain that to somebody who's not does not know what that means?
Yeah.
It's yeah. Do you sometimes get pulled out find yourself getting pulled out of that peaceful place where you're like, something's just a little off today, and then use one of those tools that you have to bring yourself back into where you want to be?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, just what's going on, with the pandemic and politics and all the division and everything that's going on. I recognize at some point that I can't tap into the energy of that because I just can't. It makes me feel crazy. I mean, it's just so intense and so dense and so heavy and so fear-based.
And it's not your energy.
No, it's not. It's not. And that I think is really, really helpful when you can, identify that. It's like, what is this? Where is this coming from? And recognizing and then using whatever tools you use to get back in alignment with your flow and your essence and your energy, and not just that, because it's not that alone. It's getting in alignment with your energy, your essence. And when you do that, you access your higher self, and that higher self connects to the source of all that is. And that's what you tune into. That's what you tap into. And that can be, instead of turning to a media source, and I'm not saying not to be aware of what's going on around you in the world. Yeah. I'm just saying, and it's just, it's an opinion.
Well,
I do think if we all did that more, there might be not as much fear and as much divisiveness.
Well, because it is somehow a collective energy, whether it be negative or positive energy, it's collective. But I was going to say, and you're speaking for yourself, because you, and I'm that way too, but I think yours is stronger. You're what we've been calling a highly sensitive person. So you pick up energies very easily. So it's important for you to have the minimal amount, just enough to be informed, and then stay away from it. Because, or if there's a person who every time you see them, you're drained when it's over with, you have to question that relationship. Because what's happening? What is that energy, that your energy that's being drained, or the energy that they're putting in, that you're picking up from them, that's draining you, one or the other? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, there is that, highly sensitive person piece. Yeah. And there's also, which I didn't know for a long time, being an empath, which can mean that when you are around people, you're picking up their energy. Not only are you picking it up, but you're absorbing it into your own self.
Right.
And so I had to really, really work at that. Yeah. To kind of hold on to myself.
Yeah.
And not be, not empathetic or not compassionate. I can be more.
Yeah.
I can be more now that and I'm not saying I'm done. It's a constant awareness to have. One thing I heard somewhere, once I started understanding this being an empath thing, is to observe, not absorb. And so there's still empathy and compassion from an observing when you're with other people, observing their essence, their energy, their vibration, their emotions, observing all of that and connecting to it, in the healthiest way possible, but not absorbing it into your.
Yeah. And in doing that, you can still be fully present with that person, and actually even more so than
Even
you
more
than you
so.
might be if you were being affected by all that energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. You recently did a blog post about spiritual intelligence, and this kind of fits with what we're talking about. And I made a note, and this is Cindy Wigglesworth, is that right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And I think you were quoting her, and it could be that you just said it yourself. Spiritual intelligence is the ability to behave with wisdom and compassion while maintaining inner and outer peace, regardless of the situation. And then you talked about the difference between compassion and empathy. And being an empath, and I'm somewhat empathic too, I guess, is that the right word? Um, we that tendency is to absorb the other person's energy, to feel what they're feeling. And that's why it's so much better if you can step into the higher level of compassion. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, yeah. And there's a lot of confusion around that, and a lot of different kinds of teachings that tell us to be self-sacrificing and kind of defining what compassion and empathy are.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, 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 and to have um, all of the different intelligences, realizing the importance of all of them. And it seems like for a long time, I think it's getting better, that spiritual intelligence in the Western world was kind of low, and even emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And so to realize we need physical, cognitive, um, emotional, and spiritual, we need all of them.
Yeah.
And to me, the answer to a lot of our problems is that if we could, emotional intelligence and spiritual intelligence, strengthen them and include them, we might not be experiencing so much divisiveness.
Yeah. It's another form of um, merging, to not be all over here in your head, and not to be all over here, as we were saying, kind of spiritual bypassing, but to take the two and see what you can do with that, and have compassion. You can still have your own beliefs, but if from what I'm picking up from your podcast, you can still have your own beliefs, but it's what you do with those beliefs. So, if you allow the other person to have their beliefs and you just kind of allow, then there is no negative energy. It all
Right,
just is.
right. I think, in connection to beliefs, what makes it a less controlling thing is, yeah, you can have your own beliefs, or my preference would be my own values
Right.
rather than beliefs. What do I value, and be
Yeah.
committed to what those values are. But what can happen in the beliefs and that kind of harsh controlling thing that can go along with that
Yeah.
is the difference between judgment
Mm-hmm.
and discernment.
Mm-hmm.
Judgment based on beliefs is, I'm right, you're wrong. I'm right overall, and you're wrong overall, period.
Or period.
Period, just period. Discernment is, this is right or wrong for me.
Mm-hmm.
Has nothing to do with anybody else. This is right or wrong for me. I discern what's right and wrong for me.
Yeah.
It's really, to me, then poof, control is gone.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's
Yeah, and I was mixing emotional intelligence with cognitive intelligence. because to me, it's the cognitive intelligence, and then you get the emotional part stuck in between, and then there's the spiritual intelligence. And if you're all cognitive, you're never going to reach the spiritual.
No,
You
no.
know?
Mm-mm.
So,
And, in our school system, what do we test? We test IQ. We test the cognitive. Do we test the emotional? Do we
yeah.
test the spiritual? Do we pay attention to where a child is in their physical being? I mean, we're getting better. It's getting better and better, but those are important pieces to have excluded.
Yeah. Well, to an extent, it's getting better, but I do feel like we've gone a little haywire, and we need to kind of somehow find our way back, which is, I think, what you've been feeling, and what a lot of your latest podcasts have been about is, how can we basically, I think I made some notes on that. Here, yeah. I said, you expressed to me that you want people to understand that there are other experiences that we have access to as human beings other than the five senses and three-dimensional experiences. And you've talked to me about how you believe this is an important key to helping us evolve so there can be less suffering and division. And after reading your blog and listening to your podcast, I know this understanding doesn't just happen in an hour or two, that an interview offers. But can we explore it just a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, talking about the podcast, I just want to mention real quickly, it's called Everyday Mystics. And
yes,
that's okay. And my inspiration behind that was exactly what you're talking about, to invite what I consider to be an everyday mystic, not somebody who has tons of degrees or a religious background necessarily, but to me, an everyday mystic is someone that can go beyond their five senses into higher senses like intuition and spiritual intelligence, and tapping into those higher awarenesses. And to me, what I mean by mystic is somebody who really doesn't depend on a teaching outside of themselves or from somewhere or from someone. A mystic is someone who relies on their direct experiences and trusts them.
Yeah.
That to me is the simplest way to define what I consider to be a mystic. Because say, for example, that experience I had at a young age, after that experience, and to me, that was the source of all that is. People call that God. I kind of don't use the word God a lot because there's so many different attachments to that. But that was, the connection to the source of all that is. It was oneness, it was connection, all of that. And after that, I was sent to a church where they talked about hell and damnation,
right,
and a judgmental God. And I'm like, huh?
Mm-hmm.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And it took me a while.
With the black heart and the white heart.
Yes,
the red one too, with the black heart.
I mean, because we're born sinners. We're born in sin, and we have to, repent and do our white heart back or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But it took me a while to connect. It's like, oh, what you're talking about, this God guy, that's what I experienced. But he, she, it.
It's just cute, the God guy.
The God guy wasn't judgmental. I didn't feel like I had to be right, do right to be loved unconditionally. It was a given. Anyway, got sidetracked.
No, but that's true. So, but going back to Everyday Mystics, do you feel like you explained enough about what it's about? Because I did mean to ask you about that and I forgot.
Yeah, and then I'm wanting to use that platform to raise the vibrations, from fear into higher vibrations, and to invite guests onto the show that are doing the same and also have a connection to something higher than their five senses.
I hear what you're saying about not coming from someplace else, but coming from within yourself. Because I still read books, but when I first started out, even before I started down, my spiritual path, because, I had to go through a life trauma that first of all got me away from that church you were talking about, and then, but when I got married very young, and when I was trying to understand myself as an adult, I was reading self-help books, women's magazines, things like that. But what I learned very quickly was what these people are telling me isn't the gospel. It isn't the only way. It's not, and so I would, that one sparks something in me. I'm going to think about that one for a little bit and see how I feel about it. You know what I mean? And that's kind of where I ended up. And I think that's what you're saying with the mystics. It's not that they don't get information from other places, but what does that information mean to them?
Exactly, filtering it through that. Yeah, because books are important and have been important to me because I have found them. I remember, and it was a long time ago, reading the Celestine prophecies, and they were talking about everything as energy, and I'm like, you mean somebody knows?
Yeah.
Somebody knows that everything is energy? And that was like this big light bulb. It's like, I'm not alone in this. And then I read some Richard Bach, Illusions, and Bridge Across Forever. And eventually, pretty far down the road, Barry Zukav's Seat of the Soul. And I'm like, I am not alone.
Yeah. And
so
that was really something you needed.
Oh, definitely.
You weren't getting that from any other source.
No.
You know what I mean?
No. And even at one point, and I don't know how to say this gently. Going into the spiritual community, I thought, oh, these are my people. I did find a lot of spiritual bypass.
Yeah. Yeah, I had the same experience.
And it was hard to connect because of that.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's another, nice thing about Everyday Mystics is because you are connecting with people that are coming more from a place that you've grown to be in, because it could feel like a very lonely world. I'm sure, like we've talked about, square peg, round hole, So until you start discovering that you're not alone, then that would be I can't even imagine. I really can't.
And I don't know how this is coming across. I always feel like I have to clarify that I don't think I've arrived anywhere. I don't think I'm anything special. I mean, I do. I have high self-esteem. I care about myself. It's not that, but I hope this doesn't come across like I think I'm something different.
No.
Or better somehow, or superior. I don't feel it at all.
I know that. Yeah. No, but I think it's, how can you not explore it when people say these things to you, it's part of who you are. So you almost have to explore it. You know what I mean? That's not to say that, oh, well, that's the reason they're picking up my energy is because I am, the almighty guru of the world. That's not it. No. It's like, but why are they picking up my energy? And it was a positive experience. So why wouldn't I want to remain aware of that,
Yeah. And I mean, we are doing an interview and we're kind of focused in
on your experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But speaking of nature, there was this one experience with a friend of mine where we were at this park and there weren't people around. It was just, open nature. And we were in this open field. And a lot of times with this particular person, we have very, very transcendent, profound experiences. And this particular time, and we can get a lot of times where we're just sitting in silence, just natural. It just naturally happens that way. And we're both really comfortable in silence. So this particular day, we're sitting there, and I was looking at this tree off in the distance, and I could see the aura around the tree. I started seeing it. And then that aura, everything I looked at, I started seeing the aura around everything I looked at. So that started happening. And then it went from that to kind of the auras of everything connecting, and kind of there was this kind of feeling, and everything became light.
Wow.
Everything became light. And I just was captured by that. And I just, was in it. And then eventually it faded in a way. And I came back and I told my friend about it. And after that, and I knew intuitively when everything became light, I knew I could only stay there so long, or my physical being could not handle the energy of it.
Wow.
And I knew intuitively when I had to be released from it, or I would not have been able to handle the energy.
Yeah.
So I told my friend about it, and then my experience once I got back home is it was at least 3 days that I really couldn't sleep or eat. I had no hunger. What's that?
I said, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
When you looked in the mirror, did you see an aura around you?
No.
No.
Everything was normal, just energetically.
Yeah, right.
I was charged. It was like I had plugged into some kind of energy source that just, how your phone battery can be low to fully charged.
Yeah.
It's beyond fully charged. It's like at the limit.
And it didn't creep up there.
Right. Yeah. So it was like 3 days of not being able to sleep.
Wow.
And not being hungry, but also not being tired. I just was charged.
Did anything else happen at that time? Did you get a surge of creative downloads or anything like that? I'm just wondering what the purpose of the energy was, if it was trying to. Did you feel like some sort of shift besides the energy, I guess is.
I think just even more. I don't know how to explain it, but from 8 years old and all these different experiences that I've had, and they're all similar in a way.
Right.
There's an expression, and I'm not sure who says it. Less of me, more of God.
So it really didn't matter. It really didn't matter what the energy was about. You knew the energy was there. You experienced it. You know where it came from, and you just again allowed it. And strange experience though.
But I think
and that's what I was going to ask you, because in the beginning I had asked, okay, so was that the ultimate experience at 8 years old, or did you have other similar experiences? And you said, yeah. Well, I didn't bother to dig in more and say, well, what were some of those other, basically big experiences? That's been happening to you your whole life. I mean, not the experiences with your friend, because he wasn't always there, but your whole life you've seen things, and and when you were younger, it was like you couldn't figure out what the heck it was about, So, and this one is kind of related, and I don't know if I took it all or I just paraphrased from your blog, but I really liked this. Now, is it big like what you just described, maybe not, but I thought it was a beautiful example of what it means to just allow and be. So you went for a walk in the woods, and entering the path, I walked until I reached a bend in the road where I sat down on a bench. I could see the continuing path on one side of me, and on the other path that I had just walked. From my sitting position, both paths were equal in my vision. Here I was in the middle, the present moment. Behind me, the past, in front of me, the future. But the only true reality was the moment on the park bench. So tell me more.
Yeah, I remember that day so clearly. Yeah. It was, total presence, oneness. Everything I looked at was alive and energetic, and even looking down at the ground, just each pebble had meaning and significance. Everything had meaning and significance. And I remember sitting on the bench, and there was a tree in front of me, lots of trees in the park, and the wind blew and kind of rustled the leaves where I could hear it. And I remember thinking, that's kind of how we are, when the Spirit of God, the source of all that is, we are the vessels and the messengers ourselves, and God can't speak until he speaks through us. That's the importance we have here on earth. If we take it, if we take on that. And I remember, we're just, God is like the wind that flows through us. And just like I'm hearing the leaves on the tree, we have to speak for God. We are the vessel. We are the messenger. God works through us. And that whole experience was perfect in its own way.
Yeah. And I dare to bet that those type of experiences have come to you a lot over the years too.
A lot.
So it's interesting to me that the big, like, almost impossible to explain experiences that you just described, and then this beautiful, peaceful, because you're still in the moment, connected in another place, but it's a different experience.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of.
Yeah, I kind of feel like each of these experiences, that when we're in our everyday kind of consciousness, our more of the faster brain waves, to create focus, which we need to do, we need to have. But when there is a kind of settling in and a relaxation, I think almost like when you're slowing down and drifting into twilight to go into sleep, there's that. And I don't know this for sure, but there is another brainwave called gamma that is beyond the sleep brainwave of delta. And I think some people can go from like this meditative place and almost where most people would fall asleep, some people can stay awake and their brainwaves shift into these gamma brainwaves, which are actually super speed fast. And connects them to everything. It's kind of like this explosion, and then you're just connected.
Yeah.
I don't know any of that for 100%. For sure, there are lots of people that know a lot more about those things than I do.
All right.
There is definitely other dimensions beyond three-dimensional experience.
I was going to ask you about that, and then we probably should go because
Yeah.
this is the longest interview ever. But you know what? I have enough notes and stuff. We can do it again.
Oh, good.
I think it'd be fun. Yeah, because when you mentioned about that, you want people to know, that there's more, and I said, first, what do you mean by three-dimensional experiences? Because I don't know that I fully know.
Well, again, it's going beyond the five senses.
Okay.
You,
So
you
then,
know, you know what your intuition feels like, right?
yes.
And then there's more and more and more.
So, okay. So it's also like when I've had premonitions or I've seen things that Steve believes doesn't exist, like ghosts. So
which maybe they're all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe they're around us all the time.
Yeah.
And this is something that I've said to people, and it's rarely understood, and it's just something I feel, and it is what it is. But to me, before life, from the soul awareness, before life, life, what we call life, and what we call afterlife, they're all the same thing.
Yeah.
They're all the same thing. And even what we believe to be transitioning into what we call heaven, I don't think heaven is somewhere else. I think what we experience in our conscious evolution, our conscious awareness right here, right now, will be our experience after this body drops. And that's the importance of doing our work.
Yeah.
Because what do you want to experience for eternity? Do you want to experience division and hatred? And so that's, kind of inspiration to do whatever you need to do to evolve your consciousness.
Yeah.
I got probably off track there. But.
No, but that's, you know what? That's what this is about, is for you to, just, like I said, I want people to get to know the Irma that I know and love. And so that's something that you think about, something that you believe, and why shouldn't you share that, And you're sharing your experiences, which I think are really important. So then what are the experiences that we have access to that's beyond the three-dimensional? Kind of what you were just describing with
well, I think there are no limitations there. Even what we consider to be space and time, like you're in Texas and I'm in Illinois, but in other dimensions, that distance isn't there.
Yeah. Well, right now, today it hasn't been. I mean.
Yeah. That's one example. There was something I wanted to say in connection to that, though. That there's this place, this developmental stage that I think, because we're living longer, healthier lives, that it's giving us more of an opportunity to go beyond the development of, childhood, adolescence, adulthood, soulhood.
Yep, I got notes on that. Go ahead.
That we can evolve and develop beyond, we don't stop. In my perception and experience, we don't stop at adulthood. We can keep evolving into what I'm calling soulhood.
Yeah.
And, and still have plenty of life to live in soulhood, which is that freedom and that peace and all of that.
Yeah. Isn't that wonderful?
I think it is. I think it's super cool.
Yeah. So an unfair question probably is, so how do you get there? How do you access the beyond the three-dimensional when most people don't even get to the three-dimensional?
Well, I do think that it can spontaneously happen.
Yeah. Well, obviously you've been talking about it,
Yeah. But even, there's well-known cases of people that are have a sentence to a life in prison that have had these experiences in prison.
Yeah.
So they're in prison, but they're liberated. They
Yes.
become liberated. And
Yes.
so nothing can contain or hold down or imprison the soul.
Yeah.
So it can happen spontaneously, and it can also, people wonder, why do people talk about meditation so much? Why is meditation important? It really is. And I'm not saying everybody does it the same way or there should be a specific way, although there are tons of ways to meditate. But the purpose of being still and calming the mind and the body is because our nervous system and our brain waves, wherever they're at, if they never slow down and they're always kind of in the monkey mind or in kind of this anxious place, whatever we're experiencing in our nervous system and in our brain waves is how we perceive the world. And so when we can slow down and calm our nervous system and just be still. And if we practice that, if we need to practice that, that's what creates, gives us access or awareness to dimensions beyond the three-dimensional. Even just saying that, because we were in different brainwaves as we're talking back and forth, and even just describing that, did you feel a shift? Yeah, and that's it. That's it.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of because, like you said, I think you said allowing access, but some kind of one of my thoughts was you have to give yourself the space and the room and you know what I mean? So
even permission.
Permission. Yeah, that's true too. And so because I can't think of it. Maybe, for example, you can't get access to someone else's computer if you don't have their password, or you can't get access to your bank account if you don't have your password. So,
wow, that's a good analogy. Yeah.
In a way, it's not exactly, but so if you want access to something, you have to have basically the key to get there.
Exactly. I was thinking key. I was thinking key because it is that stillness and becoming comfortable in silence and non-doing is the key that opens the door to higher dimensional experiences. It just is.
Yeah. And I think that's why it can also happen spontaneously. And a lot of times not because somebody intentionally got quiet, but something in their life forced them to get quiet. The prison is a good example. So something shifted within the person where there was a crack in the door to access that. You know what I mean? The key was already there. The door's unlocked, but there's only a crack. And once they were in that place for it to be accessed, it just happened spontaneous. And then I think once it happened spontaneous, you're more open to it, probably. That would be my guess.
Well, that's the whole thing. I mean, a big part of, these different experiences I've had, I don't know, once you see it, once you experience, can you unsee it? You
I
can,
doubt it.
I don't know, you can't. It's almost like Alice in Wonderland getting too big. She couldn't fit in the house. She couldn't go back in the house anymore.
Yeah,
Too big.
yeah,
The analogy I use at the beginning of my book, it's like I chose liberation. I chose my soul because I knew that choosing not to would be like putting a genie back into a bottle, never to be set free again.
yeah. Wow.
And I didn't want that.
No.